So it begins. Is light looking at itself? Are our stories made of light beams? And so in the subtitle, guys, when I say stories made of light beams, I was playfully, humorously also thinking of like floors. They say a building has a bunch of stories. So I was thinking of the stories made of light beam. And so in some sense, I gotta begin from here that the title of today's episode, it was a question. It was a question that I was like, is when we look at the sun, it's kind of like the light in our eyes. When you look at the dependence of consciousness upon visible form, you kind of get the sense that our minds are solar powered simply because we need to see visible forms to wonder about their deviations, variations, and whatnot. That means if we have knowledge, that means we have realized we are, in some sense, the light is in our eyes. Now, for me, what's fascinating is that if there is light in my eyes and I am seeing form, and that light is in some sense being my vision. In some sense, my vision, when it looks at the sun, it is as if like the light beam is reminiscing where it came from. The light beam of visibility. There's no light entering in my eyes, the mind still holds on to the image. That means light enter our eyes and the data processing of the sensory perception keeps the echo. So in some sense, visible reality when we close our eyes is echoing behind our eyes. And sometimes I have felt that it's as if when something external has happened, it has echoed to my inner realms and it has gone through all the archetypes. So what I mean by that is I feel that there's a huge chance in every second, in every moment, when there's an oscillation, in every breath, the whole system, every memory, every archetype you've had is suddenly like air is entering the lungs of your identity so far. Are we a story in light? Light allows consciousness. The ancient Egyptians maybe didn't have the scientific kind of acumen or scientific ability to kind of realize that light is being their reality. But they were sun worshippers. Egyptians were sun worshippers, so in some sense we can say that their relationship to light was like the source of life. That means you can say light is the breath of the mind, and oxygen is just like the breath of the body. Do you know? I remember I wrote this poetry collection. I never published it, but it was called Memories of Starlight. And it was in some sense this kind of thing where it was like these bunch of entries. And I remember Memories of Starlight, I felt as if light is in some sense cosmic memory. Alright, I'll attempt it. In this current moment, light enters the eyes. Presence simultaneously is there with existence. If light is a precondition to the observation of existence, and if there's an absence of light, we still have a presence. So I feel the fact that human beings can close their eyes and see phenomena, and the fact that human beings open their eyes and they actually see the phenomena, it is a suggestion that it's as if phases, how many waves of how many times has the light in the room been switched on and off. And I wonder that when a creature sees something and then suddenly it's taken away, it eventually builds a sort of attraction. I feel this on and off switch effect of light hitting our planet created a sort of attraction, a reminiscence. It developed memory. I feel light developed memory. The fact that we saw something and then lights out and then you yearn for the visibility. So that yearning, that desire to see in an on and off kind of switch effect, as I've termed it, of the light hitting the planet, it's as if every time, it's kind of like this. It's like I feel the instantaneity of the nature of our minds, the fact that we're spontaneous, has to do with the external circumstances being internalized at some point. So, what that means is, for example, I feel when a person sees something clearly, all those things they see with a certain clarity make sense to their past. So, I'll give you an example that when I was young, like grade one. My family had just come from Iran to Vancouver, and I remember going to school, and all I knew was like yes, no, and my name. You know, and I don't know. Like here's the thing: in the memory, when it happened, when I was 7 years old, I just remember this angry teacher, grade one teacher, just coming and shouting at me. I don't know. I was doing maybe something off or whatever. Like she comes and shouts at me, and she says something. She asks me a question. And I remember I just say yes. And then it was like her anger turned to laughter and she's like, yes. And then I was like, no. And then she said something else and I was like, yes. I was just pretty much, I just knew yes and no. And I was just saying them one by one, you know? And years later, I can say when I learned the language, the memory unlocked. When I remembered what she said, it was exactly all the English words she said had meaning. So it was as if like in this life we're exposed to a lot of content, but it's not consciously assimilated. Do you know? And years later it might be consciously assimilated. What that means is as one goes through life, they begin to see the blind spots of their former selves. And those blind spots are simply a greater comprehension of the reality of the being's in. So I remember when I learned English, all the memories I had of people speaking to me and I didn't understand suddenly unlocked in meaning. And I feel the fact that we have memory is a very very interesting phenomena. The fact that some biological entity is generated by its ability to store sensory perception, process it differently, and become a new action, an action of free will. I feel free will is the greatest clue that we are more than just the earth here. The fact that there is a sort of free will, because pretty much, I'll tell you, when you speak to the religious, the world is transcendental. The world has an unknown life, a mysterious life to it. When you speak to the secular, the world is unknown, but we don't know if it has a life or not. Do you know? And for me, it's kind of strange because we look at ants and, we know that we exist, but when we consider ourselves as ant, we doubt if something else exists. Now, most likely there is other beings. Most likely there are pure minds, what I consider. An impure mind has manifestation as a part of it. And when I say impure, I'm not using it in a religious sense as if sin and wrongdoing. You see, life is a set of decisions. You could be a billionaire, but you can walk, you can choose to walk in the what do you call it? Um, into a lesser neighborhood. Do you know? So, what one is and how the world is moving, for now on this planet, we've kind of sculpted it as individualism. That means really you can't be a person unless you have separated yourself from the entire environment in some way. You know, if you notice mysticism and all this, you know, in some sense they are experientially making you question the way you see yourself separate from others. You know, and there is of course this argument that the presence is inconceivable, the personality is conceived. And as long as we want to turn the meaning of the world into a concept, we in some sense don't have access beyond duality to the nature of the world. We are like creatures that find our immediate existence in an objective realm. But as we move in the objective realm, we notice certain things that are not objectively tangible arise. These are projections. And so if you realize that in some sense reality is a simulation of your attention, then doesn't it make sense that when you pilot your attention, you in some sense are controlling or aware of how the simulation is occurring? You see, I have found myself in moments where the environment has decided my thinking. I have found myself in moments where I have decided how the environment moves, you know? And it's kind of like that distinction of when you feel something is important, you do it. When you don't feel it's important or there is some resistance to the nature of how the moment is being, there comes a sort of dismay, a sort of tragedy. You see, it's like I can tell you, I may appear like certain, you know, in a certain range. Let me tell you what happens. Like if I am more tuned in to precision of speech, that's a sense where it's as if I don't accept the outer realm unless the outer realm is aware of itself. And that's something that, you know, we're not perfect beings. That means I have found myself become angry. Usually, when I get angry, it's just a projection in my inner realms, and if I don't identify it, that projection just passes on. But if I identify, if something pushes me and I push it back, I am linked by identity to that thing that I pushed back. So I am telling you, sometimes in life, not doing anything in a situation is the best thing to do. But sometimes in life, how can I tell you, doing something is the meaning. So that's why the pilot has to look at the moment and then decide. When you drive a car, you have to look at your moment and then decide. And it's as if it becomes a journey. And when life transforms from a teaching into a journey, that is the greater teaching. But still, we are creatures. And what that means is we find ourselves players in an unknown cosmos. And so players need action or they stop identifying as a player. And when I use the word player, I'm saying like a video game character. Do you know? I consider external reality to be a video game we're all in and we all have access to our inner realms. I remember when I was young in Iran, like very young, like 7, outside of my room, I would see this construction. So Iran, its construction processes are more, like construction workers are more Uh, Let me tell you, like if you see construction workers in developed countries kind of wear helmets in developing countries, who has time for a helmet? You know what I mean? So it was. I was seeing these people, in some sense, build this construction. This building was being constructed right in front of our apartment, and I would see it. I was seeing the construction process of a building in front of our house, like for years. For a couple of years. And homes in Iran, for example, compared to Canada, in Canada they usually use wood, and the house gets made quicker, but it is also more prone and it's also easier to destroy. But in Iran, many of the houses they are made with just stone. So it takes many years and long kind of effort. And so I remember one day they were bringing these giant beams with, like, what do you call it, with a crane or something. And I would see those beams, and the beam was meaningless until it was placed in the proper spot. And it was this vision of kind of like seeing the foundation of a building be made by setting down certain pillars and beams. And so it kind of makes you think that your inner realms, if they have a structure, what are the beams that are keeping it? And I am telling you, it is air. It is, believe it or not, your breathing is a very unique activity. Most things in this world we find are inanimate. But the human being is like certain cells have rebelled against nature in a sense that they have become their own formation. We are as if something that's separated from our family, our family of totality. And we, in some sense, are now like a small part of a big system, but when we look at where we came from, we're saying we came from the big. So it was as if, yes, on some level, we were all born, but the process of our own self existence was as if the new entering reality. And, when I identify with the new, horizons open. When I identify with my past, it's too cloudy to see the horizons. And I don't know. I don't know that if this life needs, we have to just appreciate style or precision. If you appreciate style, you can't be precise. Style comes at its own pace. It's like speech. Do you know? That means a person who is reading a speech, they are fragmenting. I think that most people, they prepare something and then they speak, but imagine that in your process of preparation, what you wanted to speak was your experiences. So you see something you've experienced. Let's say you've experienced riding a bike. Can you explain riding a bike to someone? You see, yeah, very easily. Because you've done it, right? Because there's an experiential opening more than just how the subject first entered your vision. So I feel that we are experiencing objects, but we're also experiencing subjects, and the issue with civilization is that civilization thinks we are the subjects, but in a strange way, due to the technology of language, the way it was designed, we have no choice. That means, in some sense, when two people want to speak, they must appear to each other as subjects, or is the person talking to a rock? So you see, the person is speaking not to just a set of atoms, but to a complex organization of the various particles of reality. And so what it means is that our external realm was built. It was built either by the hands of nature, then when man developed, our own hands began building over nature. Do you know? These hands of nature, I feel, take one to their inconceivable presence. That means if you wanted to kind of draw a chart or a spectrum of all the kinds of conscious beings on this planet, I would say it's those identifying with an inconceivable subject or those identifying with a conceivable object. When you identify with the conceivable object, it is up to you to move your world. So all those people who are bored, you are bored because you have chosen how far your inner realms go. What that means is, in some sense, you don't change until you choose to. Boredom is a good sign that your free will has to look in the mirror, not the world. And when I say boredom, there's different types of boredom. There could be a person is bored of, let's say, an activity, like a basic activity. The person's bored of playing ping pong, you know? But we can say the person can also become bored of the process. But the cool thing is that conception relates to movement. That means when we speak about stuff, we cannot kind of ignore how we're in a changing world. So you see, that's how the unknown is kept. If we were living in a picture that never changed, sure, that's a different deal. But if we are living in a picture that is changing, it seems like we're living in a film. And I think it's because of this film-like nature of this changing universe, the fact that it updates and it changes and various phenomena arises, that in some sense we become characters in stories. Because really, if the character never moved, there would be no story. So we see that it is in the movement of a form from a position to another in that position, in that space, that begins to bring its animateness. Right? So why is it that we don't judge, for example, like when you look at a cup of coffee, you're like, you imagine you look at a cup of coffee and you're like, this cup of coffee is a piece of shit. So you'd be like, it makes no sense because it's an inanimate object. It is not aware of its environment. Do you know? But for example, when a dog gets violent and you know the dog is usually calm, then you're like, okay, what's wrong with this dog? You judge its morality. So we imprint morality upon movement. And movement, it's very easy. It's starting from stillness. When you wake up in the morning, it's a movement of your eyes. It's a movement of your breath, of your body. Do you know? There has been times, guys, I have woken up earlier than my body. And sometimes it projects as sleep paralysis where you just feel too heavy to move anything. But sometimes it's a wakefulness where my attention is not local to the movement of the body. You know what that means? That means if someone is sleeping and somebody starts telling a story, that movement of sound can change their dream. Reality is based on movement. Movement is based on an awareness of stillness. An awareness of stillness is too instantaneous to be linguistically referential, so we can't relate to it. It goes beyond the language threshold. And what goes beyond the language threshold is raw experience. And I'll tell you guys, in this world, we're not designed to agree 100%. We're designed to see common denominators in our inner realms. That means the way I think about stuff often is not with thoughts. You see, if you consider that the world is intelligent, you gotta acknowledge its intelligence. And for me, the world is alive. It's not just we are alive and we think the world is alive. First of all, if we think we're a thought, how can a thought think of another thought? You see, it's a paradox. So every story is based on visible form and characters and settings. So in some sense, without light, there is no world. So we can again say light is the air of the mind. The mind breathes through light. When light is there, when there's visibility, there is meaning, potential for meaning, spectrums, hierarchies, and all this. That means this is a cool thing for people to try. Anytime there's something happening in your life where you feel it's overwhelming or something that you feel is happening too quick, just close your eyes and wonder what that self would decide. A sense of self without the visible sight, but with the awareness to the environment. You know, after a while, there is this phase that the mystic goes through where their inner realms become very void. So what that means is if you suddenly feel that there is no imagination, or you're a person who doesn't have imagination, it doesn't mean you don't have imagination. It just means your attention is so foundationally on reality that if you were to imagine something, it is done through the lens of reality. For me, there was a limit. There was a point where I realized, like, yes, people outside of you can give you some views. You can go see what history has seen or how far the species is looked at, but eventually you will realize the eyes that are given to you, these eyes, in some sense, simulate a reality where no one else sees. So right now you are seeing a version of the world, whoever you are in the world, because of your different DNA and your conditioning and all this, you are seeing a version of the world that no one else is seeing like you are. And if they were, it's time to freak out because you might be a clone. It's a very fascinating idea that in the future there may come a time that people, just like Photoshop, can be copy pasted. Oh my god, guys, I am sorry this was muted. Yeah, thanks, Steve. Guys, a round of applause for Steve Adams, you know? In the chat section, shit, it was muted. Damn. Ah, guess some things I'm only supposed to hear, guys. Anyways, I'll recap. Can I even recap? Let me see. I was speaking about how it's not just a sense of feeling you're awakened when you see others are in an illusion. That is not awakening. Awakening is when you see you are in an illusion. There was this saying, I don't know who said it, hopefully it comes to me. The saying was like, the smart man changes the world, the wise man changes himself, something like that. And that self is the constitution of your inner realms in accordance to your most recent experiential update. That means I feel we're not just living in a system, our intelligence is animating the system. And our attention invites and there has been also moments where I have felt nature has a mind superior to the vision of man. There has been moments where I have felt like the small among the big in regards to intelligence. And when I say big, I mean unknown big. I don't mean like, you think of human size, you're like, all right, a person is this size, a bigger person, you imagine bigger. Now, if you were to imagine a mind and a bigger mind, let me tell you, that bigger mind, if there is, I'm going to keep it unknown for people, but every person's inner realms is different. But if you, as a human being on this planet, feel an inkling, a tiny percentage, 0.001%, that there's a multidimensionality here where things are moving with rhythms that don't seem to be just originating from the human mind, I'm on your side. Because in some sense there is intelligence, and this intelligence moves, and now has questioned what is the mover to realize the limitations of language, and beyond the language threshold, we are the inconceivable. So right now, you are like you feel you're your conscious mind, and the world is unknown and unconscious. Carl Jung style, Jungian approach. But let me tell you, what if you are the unconscious, and this conscious is a part of you? What if right now you are the universe okay with itself? What if you are atoms that can't judge themselves? They're just being what they are. Have you noticed that when we walk in the garden, I don't know how many people, do you ever see people, like people judge human beings, but do we judge animals and trees? Do you go to a plant and you're like, Rose, you're ugly? you know? And you see, no. There's so many things we pass by accepting without a second glance, because we have to in order for the world and the realm to progress. What I feel is the most valuable thing is a new story of humanity. That you're not just little old you and the average Joe has become myth. We are moving into the era of advanced communication. And what that means is you must be aware of your intelligence and how your mind is moving in advanced ways. But what is the mind? And so I will share with you a story of Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma, one foggy night, this very profound fifth patriarch of Buddhism, he's in his samadhi, and he's in this deep state where there's no difference between consciousness and existence. He's in some, Bodhidharma is a being where his inner realms are no longer shy to the outer realms, and usually those personalities seem intense. So the similar personalities to to Bodhidharma, I would say, would be Diogenes, would be Shams Tabrizi, would be Guru Padmasambhava. Guru Padmasambhava from the Tibetan tradition, Shams Tabrizi from the Dervish tradition, Diogenes from the Greek tradition, you know? And Bodhidharma, this Indian dude who took Buddhism to Japan. One night, this bewildered soul finds Bodhidharma. And he comes to Bodhidharma, and the person is sleepless. He's fidgety. He's in some sort of restlessness. And so he says, Bodhidharma, please help me. But Bodhidharma is in samadhi. He's not even a concept to respond to the guy. The guy eventually keeps saying it, and Bodhidharma even stands up from his samadhi. And I think he's not even grounded as an individual yet from his journey to the other side of his own conception. And so anyways, and the story's kind of intense. The guy who's come to Bodhidharma in this foggy night to get his help, the guy evidently cuts his hand as a sign of loyalty or something back in the day. I don't know how that was a sign of loyalty, but the story was saying it in the Zen book I was reading. And so as the guy cuts his hand, he's like strangely hand in hand looking at Bodhidharma, and he's like, Bodhidharma, I am loyal to you. Help me. My problem is not an outer problem. I don't care about this earth. This earth is just being the earth. My problem is an inner problem. Bodhidharma, help me. And Bodhidharma grants this guy an audience, and the guy eventually says his problem, and he says, Bodhidharma, please pacify my mind. My mind is restless. Please pacify it. That means please heal it or something. Pacify, I think people know what a pacifier is. You know? And he says, please pacify my restless mind, like a broken soul, in a night where the stars are dimmer than usual. And Bodhidharma looks at this man and he says, okay, I will pacify your restless mind. But first, bring your mind in front of me. Put your mind in front of me and I will pacify it. And this bewildered soul for a second realizes, this bewildered man, he's like, wait a minute. I can't find it. He looks for his mind. He's just staring into the sky, looking around, looking in his pockets. He's like, I can't find my mind. Bodhidharma. And Bodhidharma looks at him and says, there, your mind is pacified. And he doesn't say it like that. He says it, there, your mind is pacified. That means you, dear being, how many of your problems never needed to be there? How many of your looking down on yourself, how many of those viewpoints never needed to be there? That means pacify your suffering by realizing it never needed to be there. Give space for the world to teach you through you. That is the teaching of the mind. That is when the mind becomes the servant because you have loved it as if the world is your master. You see all those people looking for human beings, they're kind of like taking the easy way out. There's no grander guru than your moment of existence. I remember the first time I had a microphone and I was talking, I kind of shouted this on the stage. It was like the last moment, like how Eminem throws the mic. He says his last thing and drops the mic. And the last thing I said in the first speech I ever gave publicly, I said that your moment of being is your only guru because it is the only thing that has been there from the beginning. Do you see the value of your mind? It is not just how the world speaks to you, it is how you hear those words in your own worlds. Guys, so Steve Adams, so I thanked him for letting me know that the talk was muted. He said, you're welcome, I'm just some energy wiggling. And then there's a plant. Plant emoji. Very true. What we're energy that is not just going at an unconscious speed. The joy of human life is its consciousness. That means that love is a great conscious activity, you know. But sometimes it's strange because behind your eyes you can see values that you want to endure, where sometimes it may make you want to deviate from the status quo. And anytime you deviate from the status quo, it's as if you don't want to learn the same language as everyone else is, right? So there is always a sense in isolation and solitude in any mystical experience. If you're just a person more in your inner realms, you will feel you're not advancing with the outer realms, but you don't realize that the externalization of your inner realms is the greatest advancement of the outer realms. That means, oh, you shy soul beyond the veil of your own creation, time to dance like a new creator. And the poetic mind, let me tell you, if anybody's curious to how I use language, I pretty much in 2011, I was sitting on a rock, a certain question arose to me. That question was so profound that I realized my past was an illusion of my own artificial knowing. So in some sense, I let go of the past, and then there was this preferencelessness of just being. And I roamed in that preferenceless of being, and then something strange happened. Something strange happened. One day, words began pouring into my mind. And I'll tell you how. I'll tell you this, guys. I don't know how many people know this story, but I'm sharing something very personal here. I'm sharing with you the preliminary experiences I went through before these talks ever existed. And so I was raking, like it's hilarious. You know, it was a sunny day. I was in my backyard in Canada in 2000, what was it, like 13? And I was raking leaves, guys. I was raking leaves, and I remember that I would hold that. I would rake leaves like a shaman monk. That means I was doing my own dance while raking leaves with the stick, as if it was like some sort of like weapon. I was playing around, but I was also raking the leaves. And I can tell you that this is what happened. Midway of raking leaves, I just stopped, and I just had these phrases. I can't remember exactly what it was like. It was as if like behind your eyes there are gates to the temple of compassion. It was like some idea on those levels. And it was this silly moment where I was holding this rake like some Shaolin guy, but I had tears in my eyes based on certain thoughts entering my eyes that I had never heard language like that. So I can tell you that it was as if noticing a way of your own thinking you have never seen before, and then noticing that subtle deviation, and then going into the shock of not the invisible other, but the other, the unknown other behind of your inner realms. You know, the unknown other finds you in your inner realms, and let me tell you something about Terence McKenna. Something that he said so accurately, and I found one moment in this lifetime to test this theory, and it's accurate. And Terence McKenna says that in the psychedelic experience, something happens where you are in the presence of that other, that intelligent other, whatever way it comes to you. For Terence McKenna, mushrooms, we're talking to him. For me, it's like my relationship with my inner realms. For me, it's like the unknown movement of language in my awareness. You know, I've outgrown divine agencies, unfortunately. What that means is it's like I'm not reducing the idea. I'm saying that you live through the idea until you see beyond it. Once you get to your first destination of your inner desires, you see, let me say it like this. Because you're a physical individual being, you have to go with the program of this world. So any sort of ideological system to entertain shouldn't be one that makes you ignore physical reality. So what does that leave us with? It leaves us with observing physical reality and then coming to the unknown. So technically, in this evolutionary phase of the human mind in 2020, we are in certain bunkers of knowledge, and we're sending some people into the front lines. And some people are going into the front lines, and they were like, holy shit, this war is so inconceivable, that it eventually becomes something where the edge of man's knowledge becomes where a source of pride. That means right now you might be proud of what you know, but there will come a strange moment where you will be proud of how much there is that is left unknown, and you're just left with potential. Anytime your inner realms, think of it this way. Right now as I'm speaking, my inner realms either feel less than the moment, or they feel more than the moment, or they feel they're just observing the moment. That means before I have an interest or a preference, what is that state? The witness, the silence of the witness, where the soul of the world comes to meet you. Sri Ramana Maharshi's teaching was simply this. Like, people are like, yo man, I don't get this enlightenment, And Sri Ramana Maharshi was like, dude, just chill, be still in silence, and it finds you. And it doesn't find you like the ambience of interdimensional entities. It finds you as your own eyes. It finds you as your own eyes. And welcome everyone. We have someone listening in from South Africa. That's awesome. When I think about it, if we were to think of ourselves as a telepathic society, it would mean the space of data transference would be instantaneous. And I feel the higher dimensions, literally the internet is a metaphoric reflection of the higher dimensions. So this may sound strange, but I feel that technology is our staircase to a recognition that Earth was in heaven. That the self is in awareness. You're not just aware of the self. The self is in awareness all the time. And this awareness, I can tell you that in the Reboot Gita, they were like, pretty much human beings are going through 3 states of consciousness: conscious waking state, then you have dreams, like when you sleep and have dreams, and then there's deep sleep, the gaps throughout the day. So if I was to think of my existence from the beginning of my life till now as an arrow, or a squiggly line arrow, whichever is your taste, that we might have secret, fans for squiggly lines out there in the world, who knows? So imagine the beginning of existence of a person is a straight line, and I'll use myself as an example. Imagine it's a straight line, everything I've experienced till now. Now this straight line, if in certain parts of this arrow drawn, imagine on this piece of paper, we take, for example, an eraser and erase parts of the line. Those are the deep sleep gaps. Okay, and dream states, those are like, yo, imagination, are you moving reality? So that's the thing. So if you think of life, like, I think you can think of it like in a Heraclitus kind of scope, where every moment is a new moment, and every moment you're a new self. Or you can think that you are this one moment. That means, imagine before the concept of time, people did, even though there was death, but there was no word for death. It was just an ending. It was just like systems going, working, stop. And so many things in this life, the ignition is spontaneous and the ending is spontaneous. There's this very remarkable quote, and I think it comes, I don't know from which culture it comes, whether it's Indian or Islamic, but it's the saying where they say, that when the child is born, the world laughs, the child cries. Think of every newborn child right now, they're all crying, So everyone, welcome to the chat section. That's so awesome. People are sharing the time and where. That's awesome. You know, it's too easy to just accept. You look at buildings, takes many years sometimes to build. I mean, nowadays it's becoming like easy Lego pieces, but like back in the day it took a while. But the destruction of the building, it can be demolished in an instant. And so every tragic event that has happened to nations, whether it is war, whether it's natural disasters, whatever it is an event that is waking up the audience. So what that means is I feel everything that happens in this world is like an action on a stage. And the audience is constantly reacting to it. It's like, oh my god, that's obnoxious. Or like, oh my god, that's fascinating. For example, I remember I was given a talk, guys, and I can't believe I recorded this on video, but in the talk, there was like 2 rainbows. Like, I was like, whoa, 2 rainbows? Like, you know, this earth is gracing us with too much light. You see, nature was nature before man symbolized it into his identity. Sometimes I feel that if a person has nothing, let's say you don't have a computer, you don't have a phone, and you're just, let's say you can't travel either, you're just in one spot, let me tell you, there is that same bewilderment, same wonder of going to a new place, but your mind is the novelty. That means the mind can work in wild ways, and like think of it this way. Your mind can learn from the animal, or the animal can learn from the mind. When you're a mind, the animal is within. When you're an animal, the mind is within. When somebody behaves violent, we're like, holy shit, this guy's being an animal. But we know that that person has a mind, but their attention is more infused with their biological program. You know? That means I feel in this life, if most of the times I've gotten angry, there was a biological kind of, either I was energetically exhausted, or I didn't have the patience for something, or you know what I mean? Like, it's strange. Light enters our eyes and a subject reflects out. It's like evolution. What are you doing? I want to read something for you. It's a poem from this poetry book I wrote, My Solaris, Solaris. And because this talk is about light, I think this is fitting. The name of the title is Let Gratefulness Conduct You. Truth comes and goes. We are all the children of one creation. It is important to see the cosmos in every moment and the grain of sand. What if truth was laughing at how God forgot himself only to create the greatest remembrance? So what if truth was laughing at how God forgot himself only to create the greatest remembrance? Our choices are of cosmic significance. Do not fear the unknown, for how do you think knowledge is here? The emptiness of the container suggests the clarity that can be poured. He who strives for truth has already forgot her. And guys, I'm going to explain this statement afterwards. He who strives for truth has already forgot her. Your planet is your home. Do not be rude to your mother, or Father Time will slap you hard. The memory of freedom is the memory of freedom is the best place to begin from. How does the messenger relay the message that begins within and also ends within? These questions are wild horses only tamed by compassionate self-contemplation. Let gratefulness conduct you, for when the universe looks in the mirror, it sees you. Are you crying yet? Did you know tears of bliss are smiles from the edge of the universe that is also satisfied with itself? That's the end of the poem, guys. I'm going to read one more. It's the next one after. It's called The Seed of the Moment. The Seed of the Moment. Who has planted the seed of the moment to sprout as always now? Question mark. The now is with a capital N. Do some questions need question marks? The artist must not get too caught in her art, for the heart is too comically precious to be defined. Comically? For the heart is too cosmically. I think I forgot an S there. Or maybe it's comically, I don't know. For the heart is too comically precious to be defined. All men are the roar of eons. For when creation does all the work, the creator turns its head beyond the globe. Find the all-pervading love all seek within their too convinced moments. Water does not need to try to be like fire. The secret of sincerity shall extinguish all ignorance. Do not doubt your nature. Freedom's glow is already within your eyes. For what you think is your nature is actually divinity, moving all that is you. Freedom's glow is already within your eyes. For what you think is your nature is actually divinity moving all that is you. Watch existence beyond the individual moment. How is, how is purity found? The seed of the moment is always within the now. Sorry guys, just give me a second. I'm looking for this one song. Sorry guys, just a second. I gotta find this. There we go. By the way, if anybody has questions, feel free to ask as well. I don't know, pretty much the point of this talk was that light's going in our eyes and we're becoming subjects that are wondering where the light's coming from, and we're becoming conscious of that relationship. And so I feel that one's inner realms, there's a sort of on and off. And so that consciousness, it can be present in ways where the body moves the mind in the waking state, but in the dream state, your mind is moving your body. So I've had dreams where I've moved in those dreams and I've been in certain realities and I've kind of moved. Like I wanted to go right, I went right in the dream. I wanted to go left and I was running at a speed that was really fast. And even in the dream, I went underwater and I was still breathing. You know, as I was running really quickly, like a part of it was just water and I went underwater, and there was just like, for a second I was there in my kind of, in that dream state of just breathing underwater, right? It was a very strange dream. I woke up in a shock realizing that my body has been asleep, inactive, but my mind simulated a relationship of a body. You know what that means? That means when we are asleep, the mind is still living a life. We are still, you can be a sense of self. So in some sense, what that means is that we are most likely beings in multiple dimensions, but because we've only identified with one, we can't see the others. But we see that our inner realms move differently sometimes. Like you know, I don't know how to say it, but like, I don't know how many people are conscious of their speed, of their natural speed of thought, like how thoughts move in their inner realms, how ideas come and go for them. I don't know how many people are acquainted with the speed, but when you notice how what your own pace, natural pace is, anything that deviates from your natural pace immediately comes into your observance. So what that means is, imagine, excuse me, imagine you are in a room, okay, sitting in a room, and suddenly you hear sounds and you look back and you see someone's entered the room. Now, in our inner realms, we're starting in this pitch black just presence of the moment. Do you know? But if the external activities kind of settles down like ripples on a pond, then the inner realm, the person will suddenly notice that it's much more vibrant. And I don't know if it's because the attention is animating reality, so when the attention goes on the inner realms, the reality animates, or the attention is simply the receiver of what is animate from before. That means the whole point of simulation, the simulation theory, is that are we being remote controlled from another dimension? Remotely controlled from another dimension? And, you know, we can kind of think of it this way, that the laws of nature, like we're thinking of gravity as a force, as a field. But what if a field was a dimension? Sometimes I feel it's like What if this lifetime is just momentum building? And as you're reaching the end of your life, you're just like building momentum, experiential momentum, and then it's like suddenly like the motorcyclist has jumped off the ramp, you know? Let's say that Hegel, this German philosopher, he spoke about inner objects, and we realize that light is creating inner objects. Light is creating the internal object. And if the internal object is made into pieces, that means smaller particles. So it means light is the foundation of your archetypal existence. All the archetypes that are ever present, I feel they are between a sort of too dark to see the true nature of the archetype, or very clear. The archetype is very visible. Because Carl Jung, I'm pretty sure he looked at the human mind and he's like, all right, even though I'm saying the concept archetypes, but there could be so many different ways that these archetypes are being perceived. That means archetypes are like the subatomic particles to your identity. There's this Zen story. This thief finds his house at the bottom of a mountain and he goes inside to steal something, and suddenly, what do you call it? It's the house of this liberated Zen sage. And the Zen sage suddenly is coming home at that exact moment, and the thief is in the house, and the thief sees this guy owns nothing. Like, the thief has entered the house and he sees there's nothing in the house. right? And so this Zen sage enters and catches the thief. Now the thief is like freaking out. He's like, what's up? What's gonna happen? The Zen sage says, oh, you're here to steal something. I'm sorry, I don't have anything. He takes off his like robe or the only possession, and he gives it to the guy, right? And keep in mind, this is Zen story. And he gives it to the thief, and the thief is holding the guy's clothing. He's like, okay, I can sell this. And the thief is like, what? What's happening? And the thief just takes the clothing, and he's like, okay, this guy's an idiot. And the thief runs. The thief runs, okay? Check out what happens in the story. The thief runs, and suddenly, halfway through, as he's gotten far away from the mountain, he's suddenly like, whoa. The true treasure, the true value is not in this clothing, is in what did that guy know that he could give away the clothing so easily. So the kid suddenly gets this this self-awareness, right? The thief. Now what does the Zen master do? The Zen master is like, at the end of the Zen story, is sitting naked under the moonlight, and he's looking at the moonlight in a dewdrop dewdrop on like a grass, and he's like, wow, look at this beautiful moon. And that was it. That was the Zen story. The moral was imprinted there. That we are going from an articulation of our environment to finally a grand vision of beauty. That means one thing that I will tell you, we have to realize that the greatest writers on this planet, they became the greatest writers because they felt liberated enough to share their style. You know? That means, I think it begins like this, because everybody starts in their inner realms first, and the outer realm, the objective realm, is kind of like a video game we're all in, right? So when you play a multiplayer online video game, different players, different people from around the world, they in some sense have these avatars of themselves, and I feel like this video game that we're playing, it's the linguistic simulation, and the avatars are our names. Our names are like avatars in a world inside a world, but we created the world inside the world. So this sort of evolution or how would I say it? It's like it was unconscious birth and death, and now it's becoming conscious birth and death. I want to read another poem from the same book, My Solaris. The poem is called, it's actually, the title is a question. Is this your life? Question mark. Some moments, pain stays a bit longer than it has to. When you are shaken by existential change, could that observance be unshaken? What makes the pen die before the period? The title is to say that silence knows what words do not. The love of reality is an unreal mind shift. The job of existence is to be anew beyond form's dismay. Can the clever man be cosmically stupid? The IQ test is just words and shapes. Trust me, if you burnt this page with a lighter, you would experience more direct experience. The experiencer is how the mirror has no reflection. How could an aspect of creation be the whole of creation? Trust life until you see how the sun has entrusted light to your eyes. All are one and the same. But don't forget, the ink of this pen shall too one day end. Your mind is the mirror of the absolute moment. See yourself within all that the self can be. Life walks within. all that breathes. Light is the space for form. Form creates the space for movement. Movement creates a new awareness to stillness. The return to stillness is the conscious awakening. I feel that we're moving from a paradigm of thinking right now, this person's good, that person's bad. Oh no, that person is a good person for saying that. Oh, that person is a bad person for saying that. We're evolving from this in seeing that there are various dimensions, and when the human being communicates, their attention is to either a sequence or a series of dimensions. So right now when I speak to you, it's like I suddenly come to speak about, let's say, Hegel, about internal objects. Suddenly my mind sees a parallel from how an inner object is made of inner particles, for example, and then I see another parallel, and what it is that it's really how images are coming and going, and there is a watcher. And that watcher is the whole presence of your moment. And I feel what is moving, you have two bodies. You have an objective body, it's made of cells, and you have a subjective body, it's made of letters. And so the mind surpasses both as a witness beyond itself. When the mind observes itself in a way where it can't define itself, most people feel that is the soul. But the soul is the truly inconceivable. That means there is this argument that no human being can become really enlightened, because they already are. I feel it's a connection with our world that surpasses our ideological relationship with the world. And that connection is really light asking itself why it's here. Imagine one day there was this young child, that started crying. And the parents were, in some sense, like, "Child, why are you crying?" And the child's crying, and the child saying, "This light went into my eyes before I told it it can." And the parents were shocked. The parents were shocked that it's as if we can have a relationship with light outside of just being light. Because three-dimensional space without light is just a black void, isn't it? And so I think the Big Bang was just the light bulb in the room. There was design prior to the Big Bang. Space is intelligent, but we're not that intelligent to recognize it conceptually. By the way, guys, to create something cool that's potentially, just to utilize the live stream, let me see how many poems this has. There's 36 poems, and anyone can choose, and I'll read it for you if you like. You can choose a number. I can kind of take the direction of this, because when I think about light, really it's just an instantaneous being. That means when light enters our eyes, existence arrives. When light doesn't, in some sense we close our eyes, the echoes of the light, the echoes of the impressions of the form, as the new to the way the brain is organized. The brain is constantly being bombarded by different contexts and different senses of self, of itself. You can see that all the children in the world that have posters, they see that other person as a part of them. They see a part of themselves in the other person. You know, everything usually a person is drawn to. I mean, you got to think about it. What do we have access to? We have access to our own experiences, right? Like right now, we're not at a level where, like, I mean, in yoga, that was the whole point of the initiation and transmission process, where it was as if silently the dude was like sending forth, like transmitting this inner vision, like to the guru. Like, I'll show you a picture of it here. This is a picture of Rishi Vyasa as drawn by some. It's a picture here. I think Rishi Vyasa is like liberating his son in this picture. Oh, there we go. Where's the picture? Oh, here's the picture. It's not a good picture to hang in there, guys. Okay, so guys, I think you should be able to see the picture right now. I don't know why it isn't updating here. Okay, there we go. So that's Rishi Vyasa in a silent way sharing his inner realms with the other. That means his inner realms are not limited to his identity, so his whole moment of being exudes his free will, you know? So, Alicia says number 6. Alright, let's see what number 6 is. By the way, guys, I wrote this book in 2015, I think, 16. Okay, here we go. Number 6. It's called Sharp Conviction. So, Sharp Conviction, that's the name of the poem, number 6 of My Solaris. I'm going to put these, probably, guys, in like a day or two. They're all going to be on Amazon or something. Sharp Conviction. So that's the name of the poem. Once at a house party, the host fell in his own pool. That's the poem, guys. Once at a house party, the host fell in his own pool. Could the ego get hurt anymore? All decisions are decided before their manifestation. Should we consider an internal, external world? Question mark. It depends on you. I have already realized I am one soul. That's the end of the poem. So it says, I'll read it again. Once at a house party, the host fell in his own pool. Could the ego get hurt anymore? All decisions are decided before their manifestation. Should we consider an internal, external world? Question mark. It depends on you. I have already realized I am one soul. Alright, number 23. The Seeker Within. So number 23, guys, the poem is called The Seeker Within. Authenticity can be a trap of words. Be wise, dear one, and do not be convinced the whole world is dark when in the morning the sun comes back up. We all try new things until we realize thought cannot be a thing. How do you free those who are already free? take the moment and be absolutely complete. Some strangers are also strangers in their home. Do not fear yourself, or how else will you be able to work? That's the end of the poem. Do not fear yourself, or how else will you be able to work? You know, guys, what's funny is like the girl in the picture is also getting the transmission somehow. I guess I can't bring up a topic of stories made of light beams and not speak about establishing how a person, any person, can, in some sense, what I feel is called tap into intelligent geometrical rhythms. What does that mean? That means I've had moments where I've been just walking throughout the day, and in my inner realms, there has been a sort of, how would I say it? In my inner realms, there has been a sort of, uh, like I'm walking in the street, and then imagine like something, like imagine just the outlines of a cube geometrically. So my mind is, I've been just kind of going about the day, and I've been also able to translate the sensory perception into some geometrical, instantly updating with the change of the world situation. So it's as if, like, if you saw the brain as kind of like being the administration of a bunch of departments. So it was as if, for example, how my intelligence was seeing geometry was for the first time being perceived through patterns that were, one can say, are not geometric. Do you know? So the same way mathematics is a language, you know, right now, for example, attempt this. I want you to visualize like a blue outline, like lightsaber level, like anybody who can visualize a lightsaber. So imagine now a cube made of lightsaber beams only. Okay, so now just when you imagine that, that's something that your attention is keeping there. And sometimes when your attention goes on the world, it's like other departments from your intelligence suddenly pour their language in there. So what does that mean? That means the moment translates itself internally in multiple dimensions and multiple views. For example, like the outlines of like this small cube made of light beams or something. The outlines of it are made of lightsaber, just without the handle. Oh, I think Aziz, I think I know what you mean when you say light is a cube. You mean it's like, preferably, it's like a square in regards to how it enters our eyes, and then it's like a opposite reflection behind the eyes. Is that what you mean? But anyways, I'm just trying to make this point that if you could see geometry consciously in your inner realms, there can be times where in your unconscious there's a geometrical translation of phenomenology. And that geometrical translation can sometimes, based on your how comfortable you are with your inner realms, can animate, you know? I feel I've, in my writings, I would say there would be a technology in the future where this technology would be the sound of, would be the child of the marriage of the epitome of our understanding of light and our understanding of sound. I feel at some point we're just going to see energy, and we're just going to see it is just put oscillations of potential design. Do you know? And so these oscillations of potential design means we're kind of like tuning forks. You know, and when we're insincere, the tuning fork is shaking between the realities it has conjured for itself to some degree, simulated for itself. But when the tuning form, you let it be, it comes to itself. So I think it's kind of like the same analogy of ripples of a pond settling, or a tuning fork coming into a sort of static state. It's there's a like I'm not seeing some Jedi stuff happen. But in my inner realms, I can see various ways that this same objective view can have subjective dimensions. Do you see what I mean? That means your mind is where the world is free. And guys, I'm going to read the last poem from this My Solaris. It's called Lords of Meditation. This poem, so this is the poem. Lords of Meditation is the title, number 36. This poem did not begin here, but words shall continue their walk on the empty page. Did you know? The Lords of Meditation are here and nowhere, only to see God everywhere. Perhaps the only thing that the wind of change could not change was the wind itself. So, anytime like you hear the concept of God, I don't know how people, of course, everybody has different their own personal relationship with what that idea means to them, or even externally what it means to them. But for me, when it's inconceivable, it just goes into the realm of the unknown. That means if you can't relate it to the world, or you can't even relate it to the realms of the your inner realms, it's like you never saw it in the first place. So we can say if people have limitations in how much sensory perception they accumulate throughout the day, that literally means that they're kind of like a handful of sand from this endless beach, as Robert P. Persick would say, right? So that handful of sand is still something. So I feel it's kind of like the food you eat influences your body, and it's kind of like what you get exposed to consciously throughout the day is assimilated. It's like the mind consumes vision, or the advancement of vision, It's like the body, in some sense, like your stomach digest your stomach digests food, and then your mind digests sensory perception, or at least the new. There was something I said I would go back to. I think it was the first one I read. What was the thing? He who strives for truth has already forgot her. There is sometimes the chance that when you really go to see who you are, you stop seeing others. That's definitely, that happens. This is why in India, that was like at the age of 75, like the person after kind of the first 25 years of life where you're a student, then you in some sense become the worker, then you become the teacher, then in some sense you go, in India they would just be like, they would look at their family and be like, all right guys, I'm getting old and I'm going to die and I'm going to go into the forest to realize who I am, right? Like there was that kind of context, that kind of thing going on. And for me, I realized that there is, like, I remember hearing this story where they said this, it's a dervish story, and the story is that the man at the age of 70 dies, and it was then, after he died, he realized he was actually alive. You know? He realized what life was when it was taken away or when it changed. So I think ultimately happiness is just being able to see what's there first. We really take it for granted how much of our life is passing as actually observance. You know, like you can see a percentage of life is going to mobility, moving around places, a percentage of life is going to certain activities, even survival and whatnot, you know. But you eventually see the mind at the end of all its activities is wondering why it was performing in the first place. And that mystery can be resolved through self inquiry, which is pretty much you as a human being. Realizing that after you have studied the objective realm and when you're coming to the subjective realm, that's pretty much where the question, who am I, it becomes the mystical algorithm. So when you ask yourself, who am I, you're not just wondering about who you are in the moment, you're wondering how the idea of self projected and was set into motion. I feel the child is born and it has no identity. The child is not trying to be a person, the child is just phenomenology to some degree, and it's like a movement of its body. And like the really, really young child, a couple months old, that child is just, the mind is learning to be the moment. And when your mind learns to be the moment, then through how the child is embraced by the parent, you see the first dualism that I feel all of us as children feel is temperature. You know, that means child psychology. This some, believe it or not, love is like we ascribe a warm feeling to it. Hate, we ascribe a cold feeling to it. Have you noticed that? So, and it's because the child, well, you can see that there's a sort of warmth to connection, but there's a sort of coldness to disconnection, you know? So, this temperature of how close the baby was held, or how much love it was shown, or how much of people, just beings, cared for that living being, all of that, it influences the child. That your mind has been learning uh, way before you were even a person to yourself. And so when you trust your mind, you're honoring it. And when you honor the most advanced effort of the cosmos so far through nature, then the world is like, all right. Because the self-worth is not constantly being changed. If you depend on external phenomena as you, somebody can come and just change your external environment and you'll feel like a different self. So on some level, it's like the external self has to have an ability to just be there regardless of the changes of the inner realms, the internal self. And you can say the internal self, the observer, is what is watching it and keeping it. Do you know what that means? Is think about it. Like different eyes are entering this world, and these eyes are being filtered through, you can say, their experiences, or in some sense, the programs of their activity. And so the way you live is strangely, like for higher dimensions, like code on a computer screen. What if Gaia was the chosen one and Morpheus had it wrong? On some level, we have to have a tolerance for emotions deviating human movement from linear patterns. That means we don't want a utopia, we don't want a dystopia, we want that which is beyond. You know, what is the effort of the breath to move? What is the effort of movement to identify? What is the effort of identification to see or to be a part of? And what is the identification of being part of something? You get access to a self that you could only do once in a lifetime. That means you got to think of your life as not just the quality of the stuff you have, but the quality of how you're experiencing reality. That's honestly that's been the major shift, because the quantity, you never know when it comes. You never know when you will have something or how long after you have it you will have it. You just know that when you have it, you have it. You know. So it's kind of like, while you're given the advanced tools, build something with it. While you are given a mind that can make decisions out of the void, that may bring the chaos from its randomity into the linearity of order, that means the mind of man may not have an ability to change the world, to create like a new world, but it has an ability to perceive the one that is here and see updates in it. And these updates of vision, they come. It's like they say in mysticism, don't chase the butterfly, let the butterfly land on your forehead. All those people in esoteric communities, that's their error. They're chasing the butterfly. They don't realize you shouldn't chase it. You shouldn't chase anything in this life. I mean, it's like it also takes so much energy chasing. Do you know what I mean? Like in this life, I think instead of having the framework of chasing something, see the potential of it and try to reduce the barriers to it. Do you know, Rumi says your task is not to seek love, but to get rid of all the barriers you have made against it. So the task is not for you to become Superman, but to see what you have considered that is not seeing uh, Superman already being there. You see, on one level, people want to get new abilities. It's like they want to shop for vision and skill and whatnot. Like that's the whole self improvement industry and whatnot. But like, you see what I'm saying? But on another level, if you don't request and you watch, you will see how the world is happening. And that's when I say, when the human being reaches a certain state of just being okay with the simple and the complex, with the known and the unknown, they begin to hear the voice of the Pure Lands, the real earth. You know? You know what that means? That means you could be a person living here on this earth, but you could not be seeing the earth. You could be in your inner realms, And on some level, there is, of course, freedom for our inner realms. Freedom of speech means freedom of mind, doesn't it? Because your speech comes from your mind. That means technically if your mind isn't free, how can you be free to say things? You know? But what does a free mind mean? A free mind means that the mind is only unfree because the past is its barrier. So when you accept that your past is past, you're like, whoa, have I entered the new again? This is why Morihei Ueshiba says, create each day anew. That means like when you're on stage, perform. When you're off stage, relax. There's this story of this man who is hopeless. He feels he has failed. He feels rejected by the world, but he still has faith in the unknown or something out there. And so he goes into the forest and he's walking in despair and he's like, universe, just give me a sign, show me something. I'm breaking over here, you know? And the universe, in some sense, to this man made of glass, made of past glass, in some sense, suddenly the man, as he's walking, he sees something that he just covers his eyes. He's like, he gets so shocked, he gets so freaked out by something he sees in the forest that he just covers his eyes as if he's so overwhelmed. And the guy is smart because the guy sees a wolf without legs, but the wolf is completely healthy, and the guy goes into a shock because he's like, how does this wolf hunt? And how is it alive? It's like shocking for him. This wolf without limbs is just there. And the guy suddenly hears something like a growl or something. He's like, was that a growl? He quickly runs up a tree and he sees that this lion brings this food to this wolf. This kind of wolf without legs. This wolf that can't do anything. Because when you feel rejected from the world, you feel you can't do anything. You're just in your inner life. You know? Hopefully that will change through a new ethos, new global ethos. That means we're undervaluing the human mind, so we're not building an advanced civilization. So we're missing out on how great our own future can be. But anyways, the man is up the tree and he sees this lion put the food in front of the wolf, and the lion leaves, and the man's like, God, the universe, the truth has given me a sign. Nature has given me a sign that I'm just like this wolf, and God is the lion, or truth is the lion, or the soul of nature is the lion, and the nature will in some sense give me what I want. So the guy, after seeing that experience in nature, in the forest of that lion feeding that limbless wolf, suddenly the guy goes in the streets, he drops to a corner, and it's as if remains in his hopelessness, and he's like, please help me, please help me. He starts acting like the wolf. And the story is in a Christian context, and this Gnostic priest is walking by, and so this guy suddenly sees this priest, and he sees nobody's helping. People are like, what are you doing, man? Get up from the ground. The guy's like, no, help me, I'm hopeless, all this, When the priest passes by, the priest just stops for a second, looks at him, and is about to continue walking away. The guy suddenly stands up and he's like, priest, hear me out. Something happened in nature today, I gotta share it with someone. And the guy says to the priest all this, and he's like, I'm pretty sure that was a divine sign. How often do you see a limbless wolf being fed by a lion exactly right when you're there, And the priest is hearing the guy, and he's like, and God in that vision told me that I felt hopeless like the wolf, and God is going to feed me. Why hasn't God fed me? Why am I still hopeless? And the Gnostic priest, the wise sage, looks at him and says, you were right. You're right that it was a divine message, that oddity you saw. But where you go wrong is that you thought you're meant to be the wolf. You're meant to be the lion. You're not meant to be the wolf. You're meant to be the lion. And then the guy suddenly realizes that you can't wait for something that you can only create. And the issue of our civilization not being as advanced because people are waiting, because they are waiting for the permission to come outside of this world which is all originating from their inside. Do you see? The attention is the god of thought. And attention moves in unknown ways, so knowledge is like, come on. We're like, yo, we built so much systems and our sciences evolved and our philosophies evolved and our ideologies branched out into many ways on this planet. But then we're like, wait a minute, did we give did we attach the symbol to the object? Did we attach the subject to the object? What's stopping me from calling a lamp a cup? You see, it's symbol attribution, then the massive acceptance of the symbol as reality. So in some sense, it's like really you got to think about it. If the concept of truth exists, truth, that means it's an unchanging thing. That means, and if human experience is left in moment, so technically it's like a coin flip of interpretation. Either we are life, all of it, or we are none of it, we're nothing. Either we're everything or we're nothing. What was that song? Like Skyfall, you could have had it all. Or maybe Adele or something, I don't know. And I was just looking at this title I wrote, My Solaris. It's kind of like my solar is. As if my light is being. Light is being. Consciousness. Guys, I thought of this right now, but I think it's worth sharing. The Buddhist gave a gift to his son, and his son opened the gift, and the gift was empty. And the son was like, Dad, there's nothing in here. And the Buddhist father was like, yes, son, there is something there, though. Can you see it? And the son's like, no, Dad, there's nothing in this box. There's in that box. And the father is giving his son the gift of introducing his son that there's also emptiness in this life. And the son realized the value of that gift years later in this hypothetical story. There's the story of the Zen master. I don't know who it is. I get an inkling it could be Dogen, but I also feel it could not be. So anyways, maybe it's Shunryu Suzuki's childhood or something, this Zen story. But anyways, there's this kid, this 10-year-old kid, right? And there's this headmaster, the headmaster monk. And this 10-year-old kid is like this who ends up becoming this enlightened Zen master. This 10-year-old kid, he accidentally breaks this rare vase that was in the Zen monastery. And he suddenly looks outside in the halls, and coincidentally, the headmaster of the monastery, the head monk, is walking by. The elder, the senior of the space, is walking by. And so this kid's like, oh my god, I just broke, our heritage. And so the kid quickly gets the pieces of this vase and puts the pieces behind his hands and runs up to the guy before the guy comes and sees the room and all this. Right? He holds the pieces of the vase in his hand and he goes up to the guy, to the Zen master, headmaster of the monastery. And so the kid has this broken vase, this rare vase that's broken in his hands, and he's there. And he looks at the guy, looks at the headmaster and says, sir. And the headmaster's like, okay, this kid came out of nowhere and look at how disciplined he's standing. The headmaster's like, what is it, kid? What is it, Billy? The kid looks at the headmaster and says, sir, can you give me a teaching, can you give me a jewel of wisdom about death and the guy's like a 10-year-old kid's asking me about death and all this, and then the guy goes through this whole spiel of like, death is just process of nature, and it's like when you realize there's emptiness, you realize your fears are void, and like are put there, and all this, and the guy gives this very profound speech that it's like, we can't deny nature, and it's all this, you know. And then the kid suddenly bows and says, "Thank you, sir. I understand now." Then he brings the vase, he takes out the vase, and he's like, "Sir, your vase died." And the Zen master is like, "Yo, man, this kid." Because the Zen master spoke about contentment with the void of how manifestation is present for a little while. And the kid's like, "Yo, your boss died, man. I don't know. Like, I'm pretty sure you're not going to grieve with that enlightened mindset." And I don't know, guys. It's not like, I think the concept of perfection is an illusion, really. Because there's always higher comparisons your perfection could be endless. Salvador Dali says, do not fear perfection. You will never reach it. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Usually people don't have questions, but if anyone has questions, you can share. I chose to place the picture of Rishi Vyasa in the right corner because you see that girl is walking away, not walking away, her back is to the past. That means if your face is if you're looking at your past, of course you'll find endless reasons to judge yourself. Like, you can find endless reasons. You can just zoom in on like a memory of your childhood and judge as much as you want of it. A person can judge endlessly. But the thing is that the vision expanding is more valuable. So when your past can't help you, novelty is the way. But if your past can help you, if your past, for some people, their sense of past, their heritage is their strength. Especially we find many people who are religious on this planet, and these people, their past, their heritage, and just staying true to a certain value is like crucial part of their psychologies. That means it's like the same way the secular atheists felt they were championing science, it was the same way the theists felt they were championing God's will, the unknown will, or something, you know. Yeah, so Javi Uchiha, yeah, I agree with you. Alan Watts, I remember hearing something from Alan Watts that just made me laugh. I was like laughing, like maybe more than like, I don't know, 10 seconds at it, and it was like, he said something like, it's like wanting a pond to be still by hitting it with a crowbar. And it was so silly, it just made me laugh. Just the thought of someone like getting a crowbar and like with the same intensity they would slam it on something hard, slamming it on a pond and expecting it to be, not have ripples. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this episode was helpful. Really, the intent is for people to find, to give themselves an internal authorization, because you only get once to really do so. Every sense of self that, let's say, arises every day, it's like the color, the paint on the brush of that day, you know? And the system is multidimensional. When it's multidimensional, that means we have to find a new symbiosis in our subjective realms with the unknown. Right now, it's either like we're worshiping the unknown, or we're in some sense like denying the unknown through knowledge. I feel those are still too artificial. But it's like I'm telling you, before human beings made artificial intelligence, they were acting artificially intelligent. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Much blessings and namaste. And one last thing, you have to trust in your eye, trust the light in your eyes. Don't you? Like we trust existence, we doubt experience, but we have to have some foundation to place a pillar of conscious activity on. And so really the world is like, think of the multidimensional evolution of the human being to be that right now the foundation of it is materiality. And we're building upon the material through the awareness of the immaterial, as if the black hole, it makes you, when you wonder about it, it's like, okay, the gravitational pull is so strong that when light passes the event horizon, it's just taken. Do you know what I mean? And so that light is in some sense inconceivable. So believe it or not, even light can get pushed around. It's like space, intelligent space, is sculpting in the intelligent movement of matter. I think we are the intersection of two parallel dimensions simultaneously. And when Terence McKenna says there's another tenant in the room, that means I don't think he means an external room. I think he means in the inner realms. The presence of that unknown other. And when that unknown other comes, it's the presence of your unconscious. So most human beings, you can say their consciousness, imagine we draw one sphere, one circle, and then we draw another circle around it. The first circle, the central circle, is consciousness, where we're asking the question, and then outside of the circle of consciousness, there's that other circle encompassing it, which is the unconscious. Right? So when the center of the circle thinks it's the only thing moving, but then realizes it is actually the bigger circle that's moving, you can sometimes speak where your conscious mind is like mining the unconscious, like a prospector. Or you can, in some sense, be in a way where the unknown moves your knowing, and what you're experiencing in your inner realms is an observance of how emotion, image, and language move together by the nature of the whim of the attention being present. Our inner realms are evocational. What that means is from silence emerge the greatest words, and in some sense from the stillness emerge the greatest world, you know. And that's the cool thing about life. Something is here, you know. That means how many people don't even exist yet. It's fascinating, really. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Blessings.